On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC Podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 Tailgate Party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 84, created September 25th, 2024. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Our livers took a beating over the weekend as we tried to go to every rooftop bar and bar along Broadway. So I am having a water on the rocks, or alternatively, H2OTOGO.
I'm not going to sing in that same vein. I'm drinking something very refreshing, non-alcoholic, and with a little vitamin as well. Cranberry ginger ale.
All right. And yes, we are on the road to recovery. For me, it is 7-Up. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is available on Apple Podcast as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. What are we talking about? A great trip to Nashville, together in Nashville on Broadway. And then we actually went to a football game on Sunday as well, which was kind of fun. Packers taking a 30-14 victory over the Tennessee Titans. Hey, then week 4, we are coming back to Green Bay to do it all over again with the Minnesota Vikings. And yes, that means tailgating in Green Bay. But let's talk about not really tailgating, but just a whole hell of a lot of fun in the city of Nashville. Neil?
We all met up on Friday afternoon. They picked me up at the airport, and Broadway is just a magical place because you have 5 or 6 blocks that are consecutive of just bars, and bars, rooftops, and importantly, every bar, they've got music on every single level. It was just a fun place to hang out. We showed up just before sunset. The photo that's indicated there was as we had just arrived in Nashville and got to enjoy it going from daytime in Nashville to night and all the lights of the city. And it was a beautiful weekend all the way around.
And it was hot. We couldn't escape it. Even after the sun went down, it was hot. So it was muggy, it was sticky, but it was worth it. There were, you catch a little air conditioning here and there, catch some fans here and there. The rooftop helped. We'd get a breeze. It was unlike anything I expected as far as the density of how many people are in this 1 4-5 block area. And even though there are some side roads with some establishments on it, people aren't really down there. You kind of go maybe down 2nd Ave or something like that to get a break away from the rest of the crowd. But otherwise, these buildings, these old brownstones, they're 3, 4, 5 stories, all with a rooftop. They're solid foundations too. Jeff, as a guy who loves architecture, you had to have just been amazed by this, how solid these buildings were.
They were. Everything was brick with the balconies and things like that to overlook the music. And they all had their own, obviously, themes and things like that. Lots and lots of stairs also in these places going up and down, like you said. But it was worth it getting up to the top, overlooking Broadway, kind of looking down and seeing what all the bustle of what was going on, the people, the traffic, the music, just the whole vibe, all the energy that was going on was nearly overwhelming, but certainly, man, it was something.
No, it was overstimulation, Jeff. There's no cutting that. The lights, the sounds, there was never a quiet moment once you're down there.
No.
And all of the boots and hats, the people watching was absolutely spectacular the entire weekend.
Yeah, if you forgot to bring your boots with you, there is a shop right there on Broadway where you can buy a pair of boots. Buy one, get 2 free. I don't know why the 3 of us aren't wearing boots because that sounded like a great deal to me.
Yes, there were a lot of people, but what struck me is all of the Packer fans that were there. The green and the gold, you couldn't go anywhere. Packer fans were everywhere.
What we found out is the locals don't really go downtown. People who live in the Nashville area avoid the downtown, especially on a Friday or Saturday. And I think that they probably intentionally avoided knowing how many Packer fans. I feel like the bar staff at a lot of places didn't expect how many people from Green Bay in green and gold were going to be in their establishments.
But what transformed as the night went on is that the green and gold disappeared and people went out in all of their sparkle and shine. And it was just a fun evening, just going through the various places. And we had a really fun time.
Bachelorette parties were still there, right?
There's no reason for them not to be there. And yes, and you go along with all the things that go along with the bachelorette parties and just people partying. You had all of the pedal bars that were going through the town, and you'd see horses occasionally. And then, but I think the best thing is when
How
everything
much
closed
did you
down.
have to drink, Neil? Seeing horses.
John, you saw horses too, but but in the end, it was really the music that made everything fun. And the fact that everyone was there to have fun. People were focused on just having a good time without any other preconditions, no matter where they were coming from, no matter why they were going there. It was all about having fun.
What I couldn't understand seeing was all the cars. Why were people trying to drive through downtown on a Friday or Saturday night? Mind-boggling. And the amount of outside of the taxis and the Ubers, why were there cars there?
Well, thankfully, they closed that all down around 9 o'clock on Friday and Saturday night, and it became
earlier than
just
that,
big. It became just one big pedestrianized party along Broadway, and that was really the best situation. But just one of the things that's great about going down Broadway is every place you go obviously has music, and you're hearing the bands as you go by, and you can pick the bands you want. But of course, you go into a bar and they've got a different band on the second floor and the third floor and the fourth floor. And so you could get whatever you wanted, and just exploring and trying different venues was the real joy of the evening.
Yeah. And this just wasn't country music, but there was more than that. There are all kinds of great covers, original music. You had more singer-songwriters. You had full-on bands. The bars were like switching channels almost on the radio. If you were on a floor and you didn't like it, just go to a different floor and you get something completely different. Same bar.
I'd be curious to know how the financial compensation is set up on things like this, because there were no cover charges anywhere. Something like this, Jeff, you talk about like going out in the cities in Minneapolis or something like that. You're looking at a $20 cover charge just about anywhere you go, primarily because if they get you in the door, they want you to stay there.
Yeah.
Here, it's encouraged, like you said.
Yeah.
You don't like this song? Go to the next floor, go to the next building. You want a different style of drink. And I don't think that any place really had specialty drinks other than like the Moonshine place that we were at, Neil, or, things like that. It's just a change in atmosphere, a change in ambiance, but it's still a lot of the same in every building you go as well.
It was absolutely built for bar crawling, where you're
Yeah.
going from place to place. And obviously a central component of that is that they assume that you're going to stay at some place long enough, or you're going to go to enough places alternatively. And the bands were relying mostly on tips. They are paid some base amount, but mostly they're making their money off of the tips. And, it was fun. They'd play a song, and after a few songs, they'd go out and bring the tip jars to everyone. And then they'd ask, well, do you want a request? And if you requested something, you'd pay $20 for the request.
That was pretty standard, right?
Clearly, it did, unless you asked for Freebird, in which they'd ask for $100 because they didn't want to play that. But overall, emphasis on the music and the musicianship. People are in these bands because they are trying to make it in the music industry, whether they're trying to make it as their own band, whether they're trying to make it as studio musicians, whether they're trying to make it as backups on different bands. They're all trying to be there to make it in the music industry. There was some incredible musicianship, and that was just a lot of fun, even if we were mostly listening to just covers.
Yeah. Like you said, it's high quality music. It's not a bunch of people that just crawled out of their garage and they're playing for $20 or something like that. I mean, this was fantastic musicianship. They were having a blast on stage, really good stage presence. I said, excellent musicians. And that's what makes it fun. It's just that, like you said, normally in any regular city, you'd go to a place to see the band. And this was times, 100, so amazing.
We did find one place that had karaoke, and karaoke is usually fun when you have people who aren't the best singers. But in the short time that we were there, every single person was like a professional singer. It's like, why would I even want to go up there and pretend like I can get through a song when there are people belting out perfect renditions of songs at karaoke night?
The other big contrast was between sort of the old school Nashville bars that have been around since the 50s and 60s, including places that Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard and Dolly Parton played at and went to after they were at the Grand Ole Opry, places where Willie Nelson sold his first song. To the big thing that is going on now is all of the country stars and even some non-country stars like John Bon Jovi and Kid Rock are establishing their own multi-story bars, and each of them has their own feel. And you go the old school bars versus the celebrity tonks. They definitely had different atmospheres. They had different price levels. The celebrity tonks were definitely several dollars per drink more expensive than the old school bars. They both had completely different feels. They were all fun in their own way. It was just a great time.
Yeah, we definitely didn't find the towny bars where you get a $4 bottle of Pabst. We didn't travel far enough out of downtown to get to that. But I'm sure, if you get outside that perimeter of the belt line, so to speak, in Nashville, you're going to find that you're going to have sit down bars and jukeboxes and things like that. But you're right. This was an atmosphere that is unlike anywhere else.
And oh, by the way, there was a game. And so one of the reasons why
oh, yeah, right. We went to a game.
And so Saturday night, game eve, we went to the Packers Everywhere event at the Nashville Underground Bar. And it was packed. We waited, 45 minutes, something like
at
that,
least,
to get in.
But, and we were late, and we were way late getting in that line.
So the picture showing is from the rooftop of that bar. And one thing about Nashville, with where Broadway is located, it's across the river from the actual stadium. So that's Nissan Stadium behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's so convenient pre-game as well as post-game.
Sure, just a stone's throw across the Cumberland River. It looked nice and close. The river looked great. There was events down on the river as well. But yeah, that building, it's 6 stories, and Packer fans filled it. An unbelievable number of people crammed into that building.
Yeah, and we had skipped sort of the big events where Chad Clifton and Scott Wells, where we had been to the similar event in Denver last year. Mark Murphy also was introduced. But as we're hanging out on the rooftop, because that was much more pleasant than being in the middle of a crowded bar when it was hot outside, as we're sort of looking down, we see the lower rooftop level below us. And oh yeah, Mark Murphy is hanging out and posing with photos with Packers fans for about 10, 15 minutes. And so we got our glimpse of Mark Murphy, but mostly we just enjoyed the beautiful rooftop experience with lots of Packer fans and lots of Go Pack Go being spread throughout.
The local television stations, they were filming outside of this bar.
It's something that probably doesn't happen with every home game. I'm sure there are fans that travel to Tennessee for games, but to see Packer fans come in and
take over,
we descended on that city and took over. The other thing with the events in the Nashville Underground, you're right, Neil. We kind of took a more subdued approach to it this year. We're just content to be in the building, not like we were jumping in line to shake hands with Don Horn, or we inadvertently walked into Antonio Freeman going to the bathroom or anything like that. We didn't really have much happenstance with this one, other than seeing people that we knew were going to be there and just really walking around doing our own thing.
And of course, we were walking everywhere. It was a very compact downtown, and we certainly took advantage of the barbecue scene in Tennessee, walking directly from the Village Underground to having some brisket and pork shoulder Tennessee style before going out and having some more beverages on top of all of that.
You gotta pace yourself, Neil. Yeah. We went there both Friday and Saturday night to Martin's Barbecue just down the road. And not only was it good food, but it's prepared correctly. And this is a restaurant that takes its meat seriously. And they had their own pigs wrecked in the building, in the meat locker. They had these gigantic smokers where they let that pig roast for 24 hours. And it was definitely worth it. Full of flavor, just some excellent food all the way around.
So I guess we got to talk about the game, right?
Oh, Neil, you don't want to talk about brunch? We had a great meal on our way to the game as well, but we did make our way to Nissan Stadium, and it was a hot day in Nashville. The kickoff temperature was 87 degrees. Now, this is kind of an interesting perspective. According to the Tennessee Titans, 87 degrees is tied for the 4th hottest kickoff temperature for a Titans game at Nissan Stadium. So the hottest game they've had is 93. The heat index for our game was at 90 degrees. But for a Packer road game, 87 degrees actually is tied for 11th all time, with, games at 88, 89, 90, and oh, by the way, 102 above that for Packer road games. But hey, that game will make it to the media guide next year for the temperature anyway.
Thankfully, it didn't seem quite as hot as it was the previous week against the Colts. And I think the most important factor in that is that we had clouds that were going over us on and off throughout the day. And the sun never seemed to beat on us quite as badly as it had at Lambeau.
Clouds and a bit of a breeze, right? The wind was coming out of that north side of the stadium, and it had a nice wind tunnel effect the way that stadium is set up.
Both ends are low. The north and south ends
Yeah.
are low. So yeah, the breeze blew through and we were in the south end zone. So we weren't looking directly into the sun either.
Okay, but this is not a weather podcast. This is a Packers podcast. Can we please talk about the game finally?
All right,
Go
enough weather talk for today. Yeah, kickoff right on time at noon. Great flyover for the national anthem, and it just was really downhill from there for the Packers. This was a team that came out and exploded, scoring on their first drive in around 2.5 minutes. Even though Tennessee comes back and scores right away, it was a high-scoring first quarter. It was a game of a lot of action and some great statistics for both teams. Neil, I know you want to talk numbers on this one. Tell us about that first quarter, first half in Nashville.
Let's just talk about some of the big plays that we had in that first quarter. Malik Willis had 30-yard passes to both Reed and Watson on that first touchdown drive. On the second drive, where the Packers scored a field goal, Malik Willis had 3 third-down conversions by his legs, a 20-yard, an 8-yard, and a 29-yard conversion as far as running the ball. It was a game plan that was clearly geared towards let's go off on our front foot first and let's take off and try to build a lead that we're going to be able to hold for the rest of the game.
That first scoring drive, though, Neil, you're right on some of the big plays, but the highlight of that 30-yard pass to Christian Watson, not that it's a 30-yard pass, but it's a 30-yard contested pass where Watson jumps, is behind and above the defender and catches that ball at the high point, which is something I think he has struggled to do, and he showed perfection in that moment. Now we go a little bit later in the quarter. Tennessee has the ball, and that Packer defense had Will Levis read all day long, and it was evident in that first play. Jair Alexander just jumped this out route, and he had a pick six. As soon as he was in front of it, it was off to the races, and I think it was evident right away that Alexander was going to score on that play.
His first career pick six.
Yeah, and it was a highlight, obviously, of both the offense and defense taking control in that first quarter. 17-7 at the end of the first quarter. Packers with 137 yards of offense in the first quarter, 3 of 4 on third down in that first quarter. It looked like we were set for a completely dominant performance, even if Tennessee was able to move the ball. The second quarter wasn't quite as exciting overall. The Packers maybe slowed down, but there are 2 quarters that to me define the game for the Packers defense, and it was the second quarter and in the fourth quarter. The Tennessee Titans had 0 first downs in that second quarter. They had 6 plays and 8 total yards of offense in the second quarter. The second quarter is where our defense took over, and 0 first downs and 8 yards in a whole quarter of football. There's nothing more than you can ask of a defense.
Completely dominant. That's what we were hoping for. You jump out to the big lead, which we did, and ended up kicking a field goal to end the second quarter. But yeah, the defense said, okay, we're done. We rattled the young quarterback, and I think that pick six really, really messed up that offense.
To Tennessee's credit, though, I think they still had good control in midfield. They had a couple of passing plays, specifically the touchdown later to DeAndre Hopkins that was a decent play. They were able to move the ball and do a few things, but you're right. For the most part, we didn't see people out of position like we had talked about in the weeks past. And not only not out of position, but Quay Walker having some great plays throughout the game where he is in position. He's making the right tackles. Lucas Van Ness comes in at the right time throughout points of the game to put some added pressure on the quarterback, getting a tackle for a loss, getting a fumble recovery, JJ Enikbari as well, putting on some great pressure. Devontae Wyatt, easily the stud of the game, doing all the things that we expected Kenny Clark to be doing. And if Kenny can, just eat up some blockers and Devontae Wyatt can shine, hey, I'm okay with that too.
I mean, we certainly had our moments in the entire game as far as the defense is concerned, but it got a little bit disconcerting in that third quarter. We didn't move the ball particularly well in that third quarter. We only had 2 first downs, only had 55 yards offense, and Tennessee started to move the ball again in that third quarter. 7 first downs, 113 yards of offense, which is more than they had in the entire first half. So there were certainly warning signs for Packers fans, even though we had that lead, that the Tennessee Titans were going to be able to move the ball against us. And obviously there was that DeAndre Hopkins touchdown that was a really big play by Hopkins. And to be fair, a great throw by Levis as well. But it was really the individual effort by Hopkins that took them to the point that was now 27-14, a 2-score game with still over a quarter of football to play.
And I think you're overlooking maybe some of the asshat play. Like you said, maybe there's not as much offensive movement, but what we did get to see were some really spectacular Daniel Whelan punt from the near field level that we were at, to be able to see just the sheer power in his kicks, in the spiral, the height, the trajectory, the fact that he gets that ball to turn over as it comes down, and the 2 that landed in or near the end zone right by us, near pinpoint accuracy, off just a little bit on both of them for touchbacks, Jeff, but we definitely were wowed by that factor.
Absolutely. It was close. But how about the Norv Dog?
You're right, Jeff. He had a great day statistically, ends up being 3 for 3, but we know realistically there's a missed field goal in there. In that third quarter, Neil, you talked about kind of the lackadaisical offense, and it really seemed like after getting that turnover on downs from Tennessee, Green Bay wasn't doing anything with the ball, and we were feeling really bummed. It's like, come on, what's going on here? And then Narveson comes out, and you could just feel kind of the wind in the sails coming out. It felt like there's a momentum change going on. That kick misses wide right. We're like, oh man, this was a horrible result from a turnover on downs. And then all of a sudden, we're like, there's a flag on the play. And the question becomes, how the hell is there holding on the defense on a field goal? I still don't know. I'm not going to complain because it went in our favor, but I still don't get it. But it is a huge momentum changer, because it results in this great screen pass to Emmanuel Wilson for 31 yards.
But the missed field goal with the penalty and the pass to Wilson was essentially our entire highlight reel for the entire third quarter. We only had 55 yards of offense in the third quarter, 30 of them on that pass to Wilson that went for the touchdown.
But it was a demoralizing turn of events for Tennessee, because instead of them getting the ball back only down 20-7, we go up 27-7 and really set the tone for the rest of the game and for the defense at that point as well, or we were hoping.
But it wasn't a demoralizing turn for the Titans, because they went down in 7 plays, went 68 yards, scored a touchdown to make it a 13-point game. That was the point where I think there were real concerns about, is our defense going to melt in this heat? Is there going to be a problem? And the Packers immediately came out of that with a 3-and-out. It's like, oh shit, the Titans can make this a 1-score game on the next drive.
Yeah, but they didn't, Neil. Come on. We all know the result on this one. The fourth
but
quarter,
they didn't because of the defense, right? They were moving down the field, 2 big plays to Hopkins, but then it was that strip sack with Enigbari and Lucas Van Ness recovering the ball that stopped that momentum. But we weren't actually stopping them in that third quarter with our D-backs. We're stopping them with our front 4.
Yeah, but when you can get to and strip sack the quarterback in less than 3 seconds to get that, I mean, that was absolutely amazing. And I think at that point, the defense said, okay, we're going to take over from here. And the sack fest began.
Yeah, the Packers had 7 sacks in the second half of that game, 3 in the third quarter, 4 in the fourth quarter. And looking at how dominant that defense goes, if you exclude that last drive that Tennessee got the ball back with 2 minutes left, down 30-13. So if we exclude that last drive, that is essentially them playing with house money and really having no chance, in the fourth quarter, other than that drive, the Titans had 4 yards of offense. 4 yards of offense until the last 2 minutes of desperation.
Wow.
That defense was absolutely dominant in that fourth quarter. We stopped them. A 5-yard drive for 9 yards, a 3-and-out that ended up being -14 yards, a 5-play drive for -9 yards. That is defensive dominance.
And you talked, Neil, about would the defense melt out there? I think one of the things I commented on as soon as some of the pregame pictures came out, that Tennessee opted to wear their blue jerseys, which put Green Bay in white. And it really does change things. Having a white jersey versus a dark jersey. I sat through that game wearing my white jersey, and probably the first time I ever really felt it or noticed it is that difference there. And it does help. Maybe it's psychological, maybe it is real, but they didn't melt wearing the white. It wasn't as hot for them as probably wearing those darker uniforms. But you mentioned the sacks, Neil, the 8 sacks in the game. The last time that the Green Bay Packers as a team had 8 sacks in a game, this is according to the Bible, it was December 26th, 1993 versus the then Los Angeles Raiders at Lambeau Field, 8 sacks. So 31 years since the last time they've had 8 sacks in the game. Oh, by the way, the record for the Packers is 9. They did it 3 times, most recently January 2nd, 2005 at Chicago.
Yeah, and I'd love to see if the Packers have ever gone above 7 sacks in one half of football. And it's important that we had those sacks because when we weren't sacking Will Levis, and that's obviously a huge caveat, they were capable of moving the ball. Will Levis in the second half was actually 19 of 24 for 192 yards passing, plus a touchdown interception. But that 192, of course, excludes the 52 yards negative that he had because of sacks. So realistically, 31 dropbacks only led to 140 yards, but that's because of the sacks that those numbers sound good, because the raw numbers, if you exclude the sacks, don't look great.
Oh, you mentioned an interception there, Neil. We talked about Jair's first half interception, but that second half interception keeps Xavier McKinney on pace for a 17-pick season. 3 picks, 3 games. He is playing beautiful defense. He is worth every penny.
Been an absolute joy to watch out there.
So one thing we haven't talked about is the rushing game. So the Packers quietly had 188 yards rushing in this game. And the leading rusher, quarterback Malik Willis.
It's a quiet 188 games, right? Because Josh Jacobs has only 43 yards on 14 carries. He just never seemed like he could get moving. He's a patient runner, but today or in that game, it seemed like he was too patient. He was finding the hole, but it was getting filled before he could get there. Whereas Emmanuel Wilson, a different type of runner, he was that scat back, so to speak, where he was finding the hole, he was going through it, and he was using a little bit more of his speed and quickness to help him out. 50 yards on 12 carries, so a slightly better average at 4.2 versus 3.1. But yeah, Malik Willis gets 73 yards on 6 carries plus a touchdown. Those are great numbers for a quarterback.
Those are great numbers, but I am a little concerned with the fact that we went perhaps overly conservative in that second half. All of Malik Willis's yards rushing were in that first half. And in the second half, we only had 44 total yards of rushing. Overall, our numbers were questionable on the offense in the second half. We only had 5 first downs in the entire second half of the game, and one of those was on that penalty. So our offense really only produced 4 first downs in the entire second half. This is something that is going to work against the Tennessees of the world, but we are going to have to make sure that we have a sustained offense through 4 quarters if we're playing a good team such as Minnesota next week.
And we talked about Malik Willis having a good game using his feet, but he did have a solid game as a quarterback. Jeff, you even asked last week about being a game manager. And I think that, again, he is a smart quarterback and he is running the offense that he's told to run. And he ends up 13 of 19 for 202 yards. In addition to the rushing touchdown, he gets a passing touchdown, no interceptions. Now, he does take 3 sacks for a total of 12 yards. And on at least 2 of those sacks, from the vantage point that I had, I think that they were smart sacks. I think that he is in a position where there's nobody open. He can see that his running lane is gone, and he swallows that football. Now, could he have or should he have thrown it out of bounds to try to, get it out of bounds? Yeah, it's possible, but the end result to me was not terrible in at least 2 of those 3 sacks.
Well, he's making smart decisions,
Right.
and that's reflected not only in his QBR, but then also just his overall rating. He's had 2 games now that his overall rating has been over 120, which has been fantastic. And for a guy that comes in the way he did to learn what he's learned and how he's reacted and the decisions he's made on the field, he'll take these sacks, and that's fine. He's not chucking it up there. You look at Will Levis. Oh, he played pretty well. He did well. His QBR was 15.3.
Yep.
So yeah, he had yards and things but no, Malik is doing exactly what the coaches want him to do. He's just playing within that system.
Jeff, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on chucking it up. He definitely took some risks on third downs and made some big, long plays on third down. The 30-yard pass to Watson on the first drive was on a 3rd and 6. And overall, his 93.0 QBR, the 0 to 100 scale QBR, just tells you that everything that he did negative was not very negative, and he made all of these positive plays that were moving the Packers forward and allowing the win of the game. The other thing is, obviously, we talked about this last week, that Matt LaFleur clearly went much more conservative in the second half against the Colts. He clearly went much more conservative in the second half against the Titans. And QBR takes into account the fact that while you're going to play the ball differently, plays and scores matter more when it's a 1-score game than when it's a 2-score game. And they clearly thought that we're just going to hold on to that lead as best as possible. They did what was necessary. And yes, it was frustrating when this happened under the Mike Holmgren era, but it worked, and it worked against Tennessee.
One other note, the 19 passing attempts targets 8 different receivers throughout the game. Again, spreading the ball and getting everybody involved on offense. And I think we're seeing everybody on defense being involved and everybody on special teams being involved as well, right?
Where you must be talking about the Narv dog.
Oh,
right?
we are talking about the Narv dog,
Narv
Jeff.
dog. Well, did you know that one Braden Narvison is the number 4 overall scorer in the NFL right now with 33 points?
I wish we scored more touchdowns. That really is depressing to me, because we left some points on the field, and a lot of the ways that we left points on the field were because of the penalties that we had in that game. The Packers ended the game with 10 penalties for 75 yards. And a lot of them were things that, I think on 3 separate drives, those penalties were things that potentially led us either to punt in a situation where we probably shouldn't have been punting, or alternatively led us to go for a field goal when we should have been going for a touchdown. And I think there's one drive in particular. The drive at the end of the second quarter is the one that is so damning. We got the ball with 6 minutes and 2 seconds left in the half, and we're starting with the ball on our own 25. And we actually got the ball on our 25 because we had a holding penalty on the previous punt. So we started out, instead of at the 35, back at the 25, and then we had 3 additional penalties on that drive, including an illegal shift, including a holding and an illegal use of hands. 2 of those penalties, by the way, on Rasheed Walker. And that, in the end, is why we weren't able to push that final drive of the first half to be a touchdown. And there were a couple other drives as well where I think 3 points were the result instead of 7, or a punt was the result instead of something with more opportunity, with more potential, because of those penalties. And yes, you can get away with penalties against the Colts and the Titans, bad teams. We're not going to be able to get away with that against the Vikings.
26 total penalties through 3 games, 26 accepted penalties for 196 yards. Yeah, through 3 games, that's not going to do it. Want to touch briefly on third downs. So you mentioned that this game was not a great showing with that. Through the season, though, the Packers offense has converted on almost 43%. They're 18 of 42. So they're sustaining drives. The opponents, and again, nod to the defense here, they're 9 of 32 for 28%. But that means that opponents have only had 32 out of 3 games third down attempts, and only nine conversions. So the defense is getting the offense back on the field, because they're just not converting that much. And hopefully that trend continues for the offense to convert, not quite 50%, but 28% for the defense. Good numbers.
Yeah, good numbers, but I'm going to go back to the first half versus the second half numbers. The Packers were 5 of 8 in the first half on third down conversions. The Packers were 0 out of 6 on third down conversions in that second half.
And even with all those statistics, there is only one statistic that matters in the game, and that's the Packers scored more points, 30-14, the final score. Green Bay comes away with the win, even only the field goal in the fourth quarter. But 30-14 puts them to 2-1 on the season. We'll talk about that game against the Vikings in a moment. But Neil, any final thoughts on the Tennessee game?
We did have those 3 turnovers, and we had 20 pressures by our defenders in that game on Will Levis. Will Levis was constantly being harassed. So obviously our ability to overwhelm the Titans offensive line was a critical part of that game. The other element though was that our offensive line was keeping Tennessee from putting any pressure on Malik Willis when he was throwing it. And Zach Tom is the star here. He has actually allowed 0 sacks, 0 hits on the quarterback, and 0 hurries allowed on the entire year. But overall, Tom, Ryan, and Myers allowed 0 Tennessee pressures. Walker allowed 1, Jenkins allowed 2. Our offensive line was doing all the things it needed to be dominant against that Tennessee front. And when your offensive line is winning and when your defensive line is winning, guess what? You're going to win football games.
The official attendance on the game at Nissan Stadium for the day, 67,322. I need an unofficial statistic by your estimation. How many of those 67,322 people were Packer fans on Sunday?
I'd go 15 to 20,000.
I'd go 20 to 25.
Yeah, I was thinking higher. I felt like half of the stadium. Not only were there a lot of Packer fans there, but they were loud. We took over and we stayed at the end. You know, once we get to about 10 minutes left in the game, we really started to see the seats clearing out. And in the last 2 minutes of the stadium, it looked like it was still half full, and it was Packer fans that stayed till the end.
Yeah, especially the interview with Malik Willis at the end. You could hear the "Go Pack Go" chants, and I'm sure throughout the game as well. The commentators couldn't believe the amount of Packer fans that were there, the feedback I got. So yeah, we were making noise, and we dominated the game and got to celebrate the victory with all the other Packer fans after most of the other Titans fans had left the building.
Now, you might think that we were only in Nashville Friday night and Saturday. Oh, no, we stayed Sunday night as well. We made our way across the pedestrian bridge, which was an amazing march across that bridge with the number of people on it, got back over to Broadway. The thing about the weekend is the Packer fans, there's a camaraderie, and you talk to each other and you find out where people are from. And we talked to people from Iowa and Minnesota and Texas and Tennessee and California and all over the place. Now let's fast forward to Sunday night. It's post game, and it's a Sunday night. As the night went on, Neil, we still continued to see Packer fans, but we found out that the people we talked to were increasingly Wisconsinites. As we got closer to midnight, all of the Packer fans were from Wisconsin still. So if that tells you what it is like to go out with Packer fans, not from Wisconsin versus Packer fans from Wisconsin, that was the epitome right there. That Sunday night at midnight, we're still talking to people that live in Calumet County and Manitowoc County and are relatively close to where I am in the Appleton area.
It was just fun talking to Packers fans. And that's my favorite part of going to these games is all the people that you talk to. And whether it's the visiting fans, I did not talk to very many Titans fans. I did actually watch Arsenal before the Packers game. And there were certainly some Titans fans there who said, we win this game and you lose that next game. But that was really the full nature of the ribbing I got from Titans fans, because yes, at the bars beforehand, afterhand, it was all Packers fans. And we had a great time on the rooftop, enjoying drinks, looking at Nissan Stadium in the sun immediately post game, and then went out afterwards to have a fine dinner for a nightcap.
With dining at night on a rooftop, it also gave us some, well, unique visuals, didn't it, John?
Yes. Yeah, we were on a roof, and there's a hotel nearby, and apparently the people in the hotel nearby thought that their windows either weren't two-way windows or they thought they were high enough in their building that nobody could see them. And yes, there certainly were some people who had no inhibitions about being in front of wide open windows on a Sunday night facing downtown Nashville.
Not only no inhibitions, no clothes.
I was trying to be, coy about it, Jeff, but yes, we intentionally saw unclothed people in the hotel near us there, but we, didn't let that distract us from having a good time together at that location.
Well, and according to our server, this is not an unusual phenomenon either.
Right. My goodness. So yeah, I'm wondering if that's one of those. It kind of reminded me of the CN Tower at the Sky Dome, Neil, if you've ever heard any of those stories from Toronto, the things like that happening there as well. This one wasn't as severe, but you get the idea.
Close your curtains, people.
That's all it takes.
Oh, why? You guys were clearly enjoying the show. You're sharing the enjoyment with other people. People are just going to have
Yes.
fun. Just let people have fun, for Pete's sake. You don't need to be so damn Minnesota and Puritan, for God's sake, Jeff. Take that Minnesota stick out of your ass.
There's a fine line between, oh, I observed something, and hey, I'm peeping on something. And we skirted that line quite well, didn't we, Jeff?
We had no binoculars, John. We were good.
Yes, I think that would have been the difference. Had we broken out the binoculars, it might have been a different story on what our intentions were while we were observing the building next door. I'm not going to have to worry about that this weekend, though, because I'm going to be at home. I do close my drapes, at least when I'm in the bedroom and the bathroom, so I'll be fine there. But looking forward to a game on Sunday as the Minnesota Vikings are coming to town. It is the second home game. It is a gold package game. That means the Milwaukee fan ticket holders are going to be coming to Green Bay for a noon matchup. Here's hoping that they aren't selling those tickets off to the Vikings fans. I haven't even checked on the prices. I probably should have for this part. But the 3-0 Minnesota Vikings against the 2-1 Packers, a team that we thought would only win 4 games this year. Jeff, how the hell are the Vikings 3-0?
Well, Sam Darnold is playing pretty well, and a guy by the name of Aaron Jones, he's doing pretty well on the ground as well. He's the number 10 rusher in the NFL, and this is an interesting matchup of rushing teams. We know that Justin Jefferson for the Vikings is good and is one of the leading receivers in the league. However, so again, Aaron Jones, number 10, and we've got a pretty good running back as well, Josh Jacobs. He's 6th in the league overall. So we got a matchup of 2 NFL top 10 rushers in this game.
I mean, the real question is, are these Minnesota Vikings for real? Obviously, beating the Giants doesn't tell you anything. They beat San Francisco and they walloped Houston last weekend. Of course, they beat Houston at home and San Francisco is all beat up. There's certainly a lot of momentum. There are a lot of people who've now pushed Minnesota into that Super Bowl consideration teams. And I don't know. I have a hard time buying it. Certainly their defense has played well, but they have clear limitations that have not been fully exposed so far this season. Most importantly for them, yes, Darnold has played well. You know, his overall numbers are great. He's got leading the NFL in touchdowns with 8, but he only has 657 passing yards. They're not asking him to do that much. Those 657 passing yards actually are 13th in the NFL in passing yards. So they have been opportunistic as far as Sam Darnold is concerned. And Sam Darnold has also gotten lucky. He's fumbled the ball 3 times and has lost it 0 times. That is an unsustainable rate of fumbling and holding on to that football. And yes, their rushing defense is spectacular. They're tied for 2nd in the NFL, only allowing 214 rushing yards. That's going against the Packers, who are 1st in rushing yards at 612. So obviously they are going to be able to put pressure on our running game. By the same token, the Vikings pass defense is actually 26th in the NFL. They have allowed 718 yards total on the season, 239 yards per game. They have a clear place to attack in their defensive backs.
So the question really comes down to who is playing quarterback for the Packers?
Jeff, if I knew that question, we'd have a much easier podcast.
Right. If we knew the answer to that, we'd have a much wider audience on the show. I got to think that Malik Willis is going to go one more week here. I think that the fact that Jordan Love was on the inactive list this past week for the 2nd week in a row, I think if he had any chance of playing, I think he's in uniform. So certainly he's getting better. The reports are he's still in practice, limited participant, wearing the sleeve on his knee. You know, limited participant really means he shows up and he does warm-ups. So he's not really even walking through the offense or even doing anything in that respect. I'm sure he's keeping his arm loose and things like that. I just don't see him jumping into the game and starting. So I think that you game plan for Malik Willis. And I think that Mike LaFleur has shown 2 games in a row that he can get this young quarterback ready to go, that his offensive line has come together. They have some confidence in maintaining a running game, and the receivers, they're all in. The receivers on this offense are so selfless, it's unreal. They know that the team succeeding is the greater good. Christian Watson, 0 catches 2 weeks ago, 2 catches this past week, and he's leading that charge. So he's showing some good leadership amongst the crew that let's get out there, work as a team, and let's get a win. And I think that's what we're going to see this week.
And we are seeing our offensive line coming together. I gave the pressure totals for the game against the Titans, but globally, if you look at total pressures allowed on the year, Zach Tom is the best tackle in the NFL, obviously with that 0. You can't do any better
Yeah,
than
it's
that.
hard to do better than that, right?
But you look at Sean Ryan, he's allowed 3. That puts him 13th of 63 guards. Elton Jenkins, only 2 pressures allowed on the year. That's 7th out of 63 guards. And Josh Myers, 2 pressures. That's 4th out of 33 centers. Rasheed Walker is the weak point. He's allowed 5. That still puts him in the top half with 22 out of 59. The Vikings offensive line, on the other hand, is allowed 7, 10, 10, 5, and 1. So they've got one good offensive lineman for pass blocking at their left guard position. Everyone else is in the bottom half of the league as far as pressures allowed. And oh, by the way, Walker, our weakest offensive lineman, would rank 2nd on the Vikings line for pressures allowed. So I think there is a real advantage that we're going to be able to exploit. And if Malik Willis ends up being the quarterback, they're obviously going to try to take advantage of these strengths that we have, not just running the ball, but also throwing the ball.
And this is where Sam Darnold could show his true Sam Darnold colors, perhaps, as a Viking quarterback. Like you said, he's had 3 good weeks. Are the defensive backs and are the turnovers going to continue with the defense? And we can hope that that's going to be the case, because that, again, could be the difference in this game. Pressure the Vikings, pressure Sam Darnold into throwing a couple more interceptions. You know, we've got 7 so far this year. That's pretty good in 3 games, matching our entire total from last year. Let's get some more, and let's get some more sacks as well. Really rattle Sam Darnold, and I think that that's going to be a huge key.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to top 8 sacks. Expect a letdown on that side of it, but let's hope that the defense shows their speed when we get Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness and JJ Enigbari out there getting out on the edge.
And we certainly saw that rotation having an impact in the game against the Titans. The one thing that we need to not have an impact in a negative sense is penalties. The Packers offense has 21 penalties on the year. That's 3rd in the NFL with 135 offensive penalty yards accepted. That's 2nd in the NFL. That's not a statistic where you want to be 2nd in the NFL. We've got to make sure that we don't hold back our offense by making those mistakes. And it's up to them to allow us to sustain drives by not making those mistakes.
You know, one thing that's been brought to my attention by one of our loyal viewers is that we have, in the last couple of games, failed to mention who our picks are for winning the game. We did we have our own, we know what they are internally, but we haven't mentioned the podcast. So to remind everyone, I'm picking a win this week against the Vikings. Jeff, Neil, I think you guys both had wins down as well.
I had wins, but I mean, I think that our picks at the beginning of the season are not what matters. It's what we think is going to happen now with where the team is right now. I'm still going to stick with win, whether it is Love or Willis as quarterback, because I think the Vikings are running on a high, and it's a high that is not fully justified by what they have done so far this season. They're going to encounter Lambeau Field reality. They're going to encounter Packers reality. That defense is going to punish them. That offense is going to do some of the things we've seen them do throughout the season.
And this is a heavyweight matchup between two of basically the class in the NFC North. Since 2002, the Packers and the Vikings have accounted for 17 of the 22 NFC North titles. Packers 12 of those, Vikings 5. Even though it's early in the season, with a division matchup like this, the winner basically is, I think in this case, is going to really open up a lead and for supremacy of the NFC North. Even though it's early, kind of knock the Vikings back, and then they're going to have the same record, and then the Packers have basically a half game lead because of that head-to-head matchup. That's what I'm looking for, and I hope they play with that urgency that this is really an important game for this early in the season.
And as we like to say in Lot 1, we have never lost a tailgate. Something to point out, the Lot 1 tailgate party is every home game. Doesn't matter if it's preseason, postseason, green package, gold package, rain, snow, it doesn't matter. The Lot 1 tailgate party will be there. So we will be welcoming the Minnesota Vikings fans. I do expect to see a lot of purple on Sunday as well. But the noon kickoff means the parking lots open up at 8 a.m. So Lot 1 will be ready to go. Did you guys know there are 2 members of the Tailgating Hall of Fame in Green Bay. One of them is the Lot 1 tailgate party. The other one is called the Lambulance. It is an ambulance with the word Lambo on it, so it's combined Lambo with ambulance. It's a converted ambulance. Surely you've seen it in the parking lot. They put on a great party as well. They also do some apple pie shots. They do Jello shots, and you can get beers there. Neil, I have it on good authority that you can get a Blatz beer at the Lambulance next time you are in Green Bay. So you have that to look forward to. But if you come by the Lot 1 party, please stop in, say hi. I'll be wearing the 44 jersey, not the Narvison, but my 44 jersey for Bobby Dillon.
Maybe you need the tape on
Should
the
I get a
back that
nameplate?
allows you to change it to a Narvison.
I would change it to Narv Dog, Neil. I would put that on there. But stop by Lot 1 and say hi, and let's have a shot ski on Sunday, and let's get ready for the Packers and Vikings, and go Pack go. And with that, Jeff, what is your closing thought?
So this is going to be the 128th meeting between these teams. The records are pretty close together. This is early in the season, game 4. It is the Packers' second home game. Tailgating. It's supposed to be another beautiful day. I think the Packers are going to be up to the task, no matter who the quarterback is. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. But again, for this early in the season, for NFC North supremacy, I'm looking for a Packers win. Go Pack go.
We've been seeing a lot of different units on this Packers team develop their identity and start to gel with one another. We talked about how that offensive line is starting to really gel together and go from a unit that we thought was potentially questionable to one that is hinting at the possibility of being dominant. And it's way too early in the season to actually make any statements like that, but we are seeing hints of that. We've certainly seen that the defensive line and the Jeff Hafley defense are capable of doing things that are special. Now, doing it against the Vikings versus doing against the Colts and Titans are two very different things, but combine what we're seeing in the defensive front, what we've seen in the backfield with all of those turnovers, this team is coming together. And it's going to be a great test of them against a Vikings team that is feeling very ascendant. I like our chances. I like the spirit more than anything else about this team. This is a team that likes to play together. They like to have each other's backs, and they like to be able to win. You just look at the comments after Malik Willis beat his former team, and he didn't want to make it a rivalry game. Everyone else on that team knew. Everyone else on that team had Malik Willis's back. This is a team that is putting together something special. I'm looking forward to a great game. Go Pack go.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, find the GBC Podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word. Green Bay Chat on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. We're on Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. May you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune, and we are HOTTOGO. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.